It began with fear, the kind that clings to your bones and whispers that you might never see home again. In the final years of World War II, when the world was burning from London to Leningrad, a new kind of war story was quietly unfolding thousands of miles from the front lines in the heart of the American Midwest. Imagine this. A line of German prisoners, still smelling of gunpowder and defeat, stepping off trains in places like Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas. They expected punishment. They expected revenge. After all, they were the enemy. But what they found instead was the smell of coffee and bacon drifting through the morning air, and the sight of American men in cowboy hats riding up to greet them. Now, that's not exactly what Goebbels' propaganda had promised, was it? The story you're about to hear isn't one of battles or bombs. It's one of humanity, misunderstanding, and something so absurd it almost feels fictional. These were men who had been told America was a land of monsters, where prisoners were starved and tortured. But when they arrived, they saw farmers offering them food, ranchers tipping their hats, and children watching from fence posts, curious rather than hateful. It was as if two different worlds, the disciplined, war-hardened soldiers of Hitler's army and the free-spirited American cowboys, had accidentally collided under one big sky, and neither side quite knew what to make of the other. The camps themselves were surreal, rows of wooden barracks surrounded not by hostility but by open fields. The guards were often local farmers or young American men too old or too young for combat. Many POWs later wrote that he had never eaten so well, not even back home before the war. Another said he realized for the first time that everything he'd been told about the brutal Americans was a lie.
But make no mistake, there was fear. Fear that the kindness was a trap. Fear of what would happen when the war ended. And yet, as days turned into months, something remarkable began to happen. Prisoners and locals started to talk, to share stories, to work side by side in the fields. Some even joined in local dances or built friendships that would outlast the war itself. It was in these strange, quiet corners of wartime America that enemies became neighbors, and the world started to look a little less black and white. So, how did these encounters reshape not only the POWs' perception of America, but the very way they saw themselves? And what secrets were hidden behind the fences that history books rarely mention? Stay with me, because what happens next will make you question everything you thought you knew about war, forgiveness, and the human heart. As the months passed, something almost magical unfolded behind the barbed wire. Those once fearful German prisoners began to laugh again, not out of victory, but out of something far rarer during war: peace. You could hear the sound of harmonicas drifting across Kansas fields at dusk. You could see POWs playing soccer while American guards leaned on fences cheering them on. And maybe, just maybe, you could sense that beneath the uniforms, they were all just young men, tired, homesick, and yearning for normalcy. It was a strange kind of freedom inside captivity. One guard later said, "They were prisoners, yes, but not of us. They were prisoners of a war that had lied to them." Some of the most touching stories came from small towns where POWs worked on local farms. They harvested wheat, repaired barns, and shared meals with families who'd lost sons in the same war. Imagine the silence at those tables, a mother setting down food in front of a German soldier while the photo of her own son, killed in Europe, hung above the mantel. There was pain in that silence, but there was also forgiveness, quiet, unspoken, but powerful. And maybe that's the part history often forgets, that even in war, kindness is its own rebellion. Yet, not everything was simple. Many POWs struggled with guilt. They couldn't understand how this so-called enemy treated them with more dignity than their own regime had treated others. Letters smuggled home told of good food, fair pay, even friendship, and German officials didn't believe them. Some prisoners feared they would be punished for speaking the truth once they returned home. But for others, America had already changed something inside them forever. They began to question what they'd fought for and what freedom truly meant. And here's where it gets even stranger. After the war ended, a number of those German POWs applied to return to the United States, not as captives, but as citizens. Some did. They married American women, started farms, raised children who never knew what side of the wire their fathers had once stood on. One man from Bavaria wrote decades later, "The Americans captured my body, but they freed my mind." It's hard not to feel something when you read that, isn't it? So what can we learn from this story today? Maybe that true strength isn't found in domination, but in understanding that even when the world tells you to hate, humanity finds a way to reach across the divide. These weren't just soldiers and guards. They were mirrors, showing each other that war might end nations, but it doesn't have to end compassion. And as you imagine that final scene, the gates of the camp opening, the German prisoners walking away under the vast American sky, you realize something profound. The real victory wasn't on the battlefield. It was in the hearts of men who learned that enemies could share a breakfast table, a laugh, and a dream of peace. So here's the question I'll leave you with. If empathy could bloom even in a prisoner camp during the deadliest war in history, what excuse do we have today for division? If this story moved you, don't stop here. Watch our next video, The Forgotten American Soldier Who Befriended a Nazi Spy. It continues this hidden chapter of World War II and reveals another shocking truth history tried to bury. Subscribe, stay curious, and remember, the past isn't just history. It's a mirror reflecting who we choose to be next.